Captain Tahoe Park sat at the command chair of the exploration vessel Horizon, running his hand through his short black hair as he studied the star charts. The small crew of 12 had been mapping this sector for weeks without incident. It was supposed to be a routine mission: scan, document, and return to Earth with data on potential colony sites. "Captain, I'm detecting unusual energy readings at coordinates 227 to 9341, said Officer Min, her eyes fixed on the sensor display. "Nothing in our database matches the pattern." Tai-Ho leaned forward. On screen, the main view screen flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a ripple in space, a swirling distortion that pulsed with blue-violet light. "Analysis, Science Officer Day shook his head, his expression puzzled. "It appears to be a spatial anomaly, Captain. Similar to a wormhole, but the quantum signature is unlike anything in our records." "Keep us at a safe distance," Tahoe ordered, then tapped his console. "Engineering. Status report." "All systems nominal, Captain," came the voice of Chief Engineer Su-Jin. "But I'm getting some weird fluctuations in the gravimetric sensors." Before Tahoe could respond, the ship lurched violently. Warning alarms blared as the stars on the view screen began to stretch and distort. "We're being pulled in," shouted the helmsman, fighting with the controls. "Engines not responding. All hands, braced for impact." Tai-Ho called, gripping his chair as the Horizon was dragged toward the swirling anomaly. The ship shuddered and groaned as it entered the distortion. The lights flickered, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to bend. Crew members cried out as a blinding flash enveloped the bridge. Then, silence. Tai-Ho opened his eyes to find emergency lighting casting red shadows across the bridge. Several console displays had shattered, and a thin haze of smoke hung in the air. "Damage report," he coughed, helping Officer Min back to her station. "Drive systems at 30%, reported Su-Jin over the comms. "Hull integrity holding, but our navigation system is offline. Life support stable." Tai-Ho looked to the view screen, which now showed an unfamiliar starfield. A brilliant purple nebula dominated one side of the display. "Any idea where we are, Die?" The science officer studied his partially functioning instruments. "Star patterns don't match any in our database, Captain. Best estimate, we're at least 900 light-years from our previous position." Tai-Ho felt his stomach sink. Even at maximum warp, that meant years of travel to return home. "Begin repairs immediately. First priority is getting communication systems back online," he ordered, maintaining a calm he didn't entirely feel. "We need to let Earth know what happened." The next 8 hours passed in a blur of emergency repairs. The crew worked tirelessly, but the situation remained grim. Their warp drive was damaged beyond their ability to fully repair with onboard resources, and communications could only manage short-range transmissions. They were truly lost in space. Tai-Ho was reviewing repair priorities in his quarters when a call came from the bridge. "Captain, to the bridge immediately." He rushed back to find the crew staring at the view screen in awe. Approaching the Horizon was an enormous vessel, at least 20 times their size. Its design was unlike anything human engineers had conceived. The ship resembled a massive sea creature, its hull smooth and iridescent, with what appeared to be fins or wings extending gracefully from its central body. "Are they scanning us?" Tai-Ho asked, dropping into his chair. "Yes, sir," said Communications Officer Yunji. "And we're being hailed. The signal is compatible with our systems, somehow." On screen, the image of the alien vessel was replaced by a view of what appeared to be a command center far more advanced than their own. Standing at its center was a humanoid female figure with skin that shimmered with subtle patterns of light. Instead of hair, her head was adorned with what looked like a living crown of crystalline structures. Her eyes were large and completely black, yet somehow conveyed intelligence and curiosity. "I am Queen Nari of the Sarathi Dominion," the figure said in perfect, unaccented Korean. "Your arrival was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Travelers from distant stars." Taiho exchanged shocked glances with his bridge crew. I am Captain Taiho Park of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon. How are you speaking our language? The alien queen's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. We have ways of processing and adapting to new communication forms rapidly. Your ship's database was simple to access. Behind the queen stood several other figures, all female in appearance, each with distinctive markings and attire. You are damaged, Queen Neri observed, and far from your home. The spatial rift that brought you here has already closed. Can you help us return? Taiho asked directly. Perhaps. In time. The queen gestured to the figures behind her. My maidens, and I invite you aboard our vessel to discuss your situation. We have much to learn from each other, Captain Park. Taiho hesitated, aware of first contact protocols. But stranded as they were with limited options, diplomacy seemed their best course. I accept your invitation, Queen Nari. I'll prepare a shuttle. No need, the queen replied. Prepare yourself for transport. Before Taiho could object, a soft light enveloped him, and the bridge of the horizon dissolved around him. When his vision cleared, he stood in the alien command center, face to face with the mysterious Queen Nari and her watchful maidens. His journey into the unknown had truly begun. Taiho stood motionless as he adjusted to his new surroundings. The Sarathi command center was vast, with curved walls that seemed to shimmer with internal light. The air carried a faint scent like ocean breeze. Several of the maidens watched him with open suspicion, their hands near what he guessed were weapons. Welcome aboard the Celestial Tide, Queen Neri said, approaching him. Up close, her skin had a subtle pearlescent quality that shifted with her movements. I apologize for the abrupt transportation. Your technology would have taken considerably longer. Thank you for your hospitality, Taiho replied carefully, but I need assurances that my crew will be safe. The queen nodded. Your concern is proper for a leader. Your vessel and crew remain unharmed. We are providing energy to stabilize your damaged systems. One of the maidens stepped forward. She was shorter than the queen but carried herself with obvious authority. A series of geometric patterns marked the left side of her face, and her gaze was sharp and evaluating. I am Maiden Jiwoo, commander of the Queen's Defense Forces, she said. Her tone was cool. Your weapons have been temporarily neutralized as a precaution. Taiho met her gaze directly. We are explorers, not warriors. Yet you carry weapons, Jiwoo countered. For self-defense only. Space can be dangerous. The queen made a subtle gesture, and Jiwoo stepped back, though her expression remained skeptical. Come, Queen Neri said. You must be hungry. We have prepared sustenance compatible with your biology. Taiho followed the queen through corridors that seemed to flow rather than connect at sharp angles. Other Sarathi they passed bowed deeply to their queen. All appeared female, with varying patterns of luminescence on their skin. Are all Sarathi female? Taiho asked. The queen's mouth curved upward. We have 3 biological sexes, but only the sovereign caste governs. In your language, female is the closest approximation. They entered a chamber with a curved table. Foods of various colors and textures were arranged artfully on platters. 5 of the maidens joined them, including Jiwoo and another with intricate silver markings around her eyes. This is Maiden Su, our chief of scientific understanding, the queen explained. Maiden Su inclined her head. Your cellular structure is fascinating, Captain. Your species shows remarkable genetic diversity. You examined me during transport, Taiho asked, unsettled. Basic biological screening is standard procedure, Su replied. We must ensure mutual biological compatibility. The meal progressed with careful conversation. Taiho learned that the Sarathi were an ancient species who had mastered interstellar travel thousands of years before humans left their solar system. Their civilization spanned dozens of star systems. And what brings your ship to this region? He asked, sampling a sweet fruit-like food. The queen and maidens exchanged glances. We are conducting strategic reconnaissance, Jiwu said. The Vorn collective has been expanding into neighboring sectors. The Vorn. Queen Nari's expression darkened. A highly aggressive species that seeks to absorb all sentient life into their neural network. They do not communicate or negotiate. They simply consume. We have fought them for 7 generations, added another maiden. Each encounter, they adapt to our defenses. The conversation was interrupted when a Serethi entered and whispered to Jiwu. The defense maiden's expression hardened. My queen, Vorn scout vessels have been detected near the Kosai Nebula. They may have detected the spatial disturbance that brought the humans here. The queen rose. We will adjust our course. Maiden Jiwu, enhance our stealth systems. She turned to Taiho. Captain, I must attend to this matter. Maiden Su will show you to quarters prepared for your comfort. After the queen departed, Maiden Su led Taiho through more corridors. Your arrival is most timely, Captain. Perhaps even providential. What do you mean? The Vorn's primary advantage is their unified consciousness. They anticipate our strategies because our thought patterns are predictable to them after centuries of conflict. She paused outside a doorway. But humans, your minds work differently. The queen believes this could be valuable. The quarters were spacious, with a bed-like structure and what appeared to be a bathing area. A large view screen showed the stars outside. Rest, Captain. Tomorrow we will reach the Serethi homeworld. The next day, Taiho was permitted to contact his ship. Engineer Su Jin reported that the Serethi were indeed helping with repairs. Their technology is incredible, Captain. They've restored our life support to full capacity. Later, Queen Neri invited Taiho to the ship's observation deck, a massive chamber with transparent walls that offered an unobstructed view of space. The stars streaked by as the ship traveled at speeds the horizon could never achieve. Your world must seem primitive to you, Taiho commented. Different, not lesser, the Queen corrected. Your species has developed remarkably quickly. Your adaptability interests us greatly. Because of the Vorn. She nodded. They consume minds, assimilate knowledge. But they struggle with unpredictability. With species whose thought patterns don't follow expected logic. And humans are unpredictable. Exceedingly so. For the first time, she smiled fully. Most spacefaring civilizations develop highly structured, logical societal systems. Humans embrace chaos, contradiction. Your art celebrates it. Your greatest achievements often come from breaking patterns rather than following them. Taiho looked out at the passing stars. So my crew and I are potential weapons against your enemy. Potential allies, the Queen corrected. We would not force your involvement. But yes, your unique cognitive processes may be key to our survival, and ultimately, yours as well. As they spoke, the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Before them hung the magnificent blue-green planet encircled by gleaming orbital structures. Welcome, said Queen Nari, to Serethi Prime. Taiho stood on the bridge of the Serethi royal vessel as it approached the jump point that would take them to Serethi Prime. Queen Nari had explained that this final part of their journey would use a controlled wormhole network, technology far beyond what humans had achieved. The transit will take approximately 20 of your minutes, Maiden Su explained, standing beside him at the observation window. The captain nodded, watching the swirling energies gather ahead of the ship. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden blaring alarm. Multiple ships emerging from stealth, shouted Maiden Jiwu from her station. Vorn attack pattern confirmed. The view screen shifted to show 3 angular black vessels appearing as if from nowhere. Unlike the flowing, organic design of the Serethi ship, the Vorn craft were jagged and crystalline, absorbing rather than reflecting light. Battle stations, commanded Queen Nari, her voice calm but urgent. Defensive protocols Alpha 7. The ship lurched as energy weapons struck its shields. Taiho grabbed a nearby rail to steady himself. Shields at 70%, reported a Serethi officer. The Vorn are using a new frequency modulation, Our defenses are not fully effective. Ji-woo's expression hardened. They've adapted again, recalibrating countermeasures. Another hit rocked the ship. Lights flickered, and several consoles sparked. Primary weapon systems offline. Called another Maiden. Quantum disruption field detected. Tai-ho studied the tactical display, noting the attack pattern. They're herding us away from the jump point, he observed. Queen Nari glanced at him. Your assessment? On Earth, we call this a wolf pack tactic. They're coordinating to separate you from your escape route while a larger force likely approaches. Ji-woo's eyes narrowed. How would a human recognize foreign tactics? The strategy is universal, Tai-ho replied. But their attack has a flaw. They're so coordinated that their movements are almost mechanical. He pointed to the display. There, they turn in perfect unison, maintaining exact distances. If you could disrupt just one ship's position, the others would automatically adjust their formation. Ji-woo finished, understanding, creating momentary gaps in their defense. Precisely. Queen Nari nodded. Implement the human suggestion. Use maneuvering thrusters only. Conserve main power for shields. The Sarathi vessel fired short bursts from its thrusters, moving erratically. As Tai-ho predicted, the Vorn ships adjusted with mathematical precision, briefly exposing vulnerabilities. Secondary weapons still functional, Ji-woo reported. Targeting exposed junctions. The ship fired, striking one Vorn vessel at a critical point. The enemy ship didn't explode but seemed to crystallize, becoming immobile in space. Direct hit. Ji-woo allowed herself a small smile. Unconventional, but effective. Before they could celebrate, a violent impact shook the ship. Warning lights flashed across every console. Hull breach in Section 12. Cried an officer. Enemy boarding craft detected. Ji-woo grabbed a weapon. Security teams to all threatened sections. Protect the Queen at all costs. I'm coming to, Tai-ho said. Ji-woo hesitated, then handed him a small cylindrical device. Press the center for activation. It generates a disruption field effective against foreign armor. They raced through corridors, joining a team of Sarathi defenders. They reached a sealed bulkhead just as it began to glow red-hot from the other side. They're cutting through, Ji-woo warned, positioning her fighters. The bulkhead burst inward with a shower of molten metal. Through the opening stepped figures that barely resembled anything living. They were tall, with exoskeletons of black crystalline material. Where faces should be, they had only smooth reflective surfaces that rippled with energy patterns. Fire, Ji-woo ordered. Energy weapons discharge, but the Vorn seemed to absorb the blasts with minimal damage. They advanced methodically, their movements synchronized. Tai-ho activated his device, feeling it vibrate in his hand. He noticed debris from the damaged bulkhead scattered across the floor. Acting on instinct, he grabbed a metal shard and threw it hard at the lid Vorn. The makeshift projectile struck where the creature's neck joined its torso. The Vorn staggered, its movements suddenly uncoordinated. They're protected against energy weapons, Tai-ho shouted, but vulnerable to physical impacts. Ji-woo understood immediately. Switch to kinetic weapons, she commanded. The Sarathi fighters adapted quickly, using emergency equipment and debris as improvised weapons. The Vorn, optimized to defend against advanced energy attacks, struggled against this primitive approach. Tai-ho grabbed a length of pipe and struck a Vorn from behind as it focused on Ji-woo. The creature collapsed, its exoskeleton cracking. Together, they pushed the borders back. When the last Vorn fell, Ji-woo looked at Tai-ho with new respect. Your species fights with unusual methods. Sometimes the oldest solutions work best, he replied, catching his breath. They returned to the bridge to find the situation stabilized. The remaining Vorn ships had retreated, though not before causing significant damage. Jump capability is offline, Maidens reported. Main drive functioning at minimal capacity. Queen Nari studied star charts. We must land for repairs. The fourth planet of this system has resources we need and is uninhabited. Hours later, the damaged royal vessel descended through clouds toward a rocky landscape. As they landed, Tai-Ho looked out at the alien terrain, jagged mountains, and red-tinged vegetation under twin moons. "I'll need a team to gather specific minerals for hull repairs," Maidens said. "Our scans show deposits 3 kilometers from this position. The atmosphere reads as toxic to Cerathy in its raw state," Ji-Woo noted. "We'll need full environmental protection." The Queen turned to Tai-Ho. "Captain Park, atmospheric analysis suggests humans have greater tolerance for this environment. Would you assist the expedition?" Tai-Ho nodded. "Of course. I've had survival training for hostile environments." "I will lead the team personally," Ji-Woo announced. "If the Vorn tracked us here, we may face ground resistance." As they prepared to venture onto the alien world, Tai-Ho caught Ji-Woo watching him. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "humans are more useful allies than I first believed." The expedition across the alien planet's surface took 6 hours. Tai-Ho, Ji-Woo, Maiden Su, and 4 Cerathy guards returned to the ship exhausted but successful. They had gathered the rare minerals needed for repairs while evading large predatory creatures that hunted in the Red Valleys. During their journey, Tai-Ho had proven his worth again. When a rock slide cut off their planned route, he found an alternative path that the Cerathy, with their more structured thinking, had overlooked. When one of the guards was injured, he applied emergency medical techniques that differed from Cerathy methods but worked effectively. As repair work began, Queen Neri invited Tai-Ho to her private chambers, a room with walls that seemed to shift between solid and transparent, offering breathtaking views of the planet's twin moons. "You continue to impress my maidens, Captain Park," she said, offering him a seat on a cushioned platform. "Particularly Ji-Woo, who rarely admires anyone." "She's a skilled warrior," Tai-Ho replied diplomatically. "I simply contributed what I could." "Your modesty is noted," the Queen said with a small smile. "But there are matters we must discuss before we reach Cerathy Prime." She touched a panel, and a 3-dimensional star map appeared between them, showing hundreds of systems glowing with different colors. "The blue systems belong to the Cerathy Dominion," she explained. "The red are controlled by the Vorn. The yellow are contested or neutral." Tai-Ho studied the map. The red areas were spreading like a stain across the galaxy. "The Vorn consume rather than colonize," Neri continued. "They absorb all technology, knowledge, and biological distinctiveness into their collective. Entire species have disappeared, their achievements becoming merely new facets of Vorn capability." "How do they assimilate other species?" Tai-Ho asked. The makeshift projectile struck where the creature's neck joined its torso. The Vorn staggered, its movements suddenly uncoordinated. "They're protected against energy weapons," Tai-Ho shouted, "but vulnerable to physical impacts." Ji-Woo understood immediately. "Switch to kinetic weapons," she commanded. The Cerathy fighters adapted quickly, using emergency equipment and debris as improvised weapons. The Vorn, optimized to defend against advanced energy attacks, struggled against this primitive approach. Tai-Ho grabbed a length of pipe and struck a Vorn from behind as it focused on Ji-Woo. The creature collapsed, its exoskeleton cracking. Together, they pushed the borders back. When the last Vorn fell, Ji-Woo looked at Tai-Ho with new respect. "Your species fights with unusual methods. Sometimes the oldest solutions work best," he replied, catching his breath. They returned to the bridge to find the situation stabilized. The remaining Vorn ships had retreated, though not before causing significant damage. "Jump capability is offline," Maiden Su reported. "Main drive functioning at minimal capacity." Queen Nari studied star charts. "We must land for repairs. The fourth planet of this system has resources we need and is uninhabited." Hours later, the damaged royal vessel descended through clouds toward a rocky landscape. As they landed, Taeho looked out at the alien terrain, jagged mountains, and red-tinged vegetation under twin moons. "I'll need a team to gather specific minerals for hull repairs," Maiden Su said. "Our scans show deposits 3 kilometers from this position. The atmosphere reads as toxic to Cerathy in its raw state," Ji Woo noted. "We'll need full environmental protection." The Queen turned to Taeho. "Captain Park, atmospheric analysis suggests humans have greater tolerance for this environment. Would you assist the expedition?" Taeho nodded. "Of course. I've had survival training for hostile environments." "I will lead the team personally," Ji Woo announced. "If the Vorn tracked us here, we may face ground resistance." As they prepared to venture onto the alien world, Taeho caught Ji Woo watching him. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "humans are more useful allies than I first believed." The expedition across the alien planet's surface took 6 hours. Taeho, Ji Woo, Maiden Su, and 4 Cerathy guards returned to the ship exhausted but successful. They had gathered the rare minerals needed for repairs while evading large predatory creatures that hunted in the Red Valleys. During their journey, Taeho had proven his worth again. When a rockslide cut off their planned route, he found an alternative path that the Cerathy, with their more structured thinking, had overlooked. When one of the guards was injured, he applied emergency medical techniques that differed from Cerathy methods but worked effectively. As repair work began, Queen Neri invited Taeho to her private chambers, a room with walls that seemed to shift between solid and transparent, offering breathtaking views of the planet's twin moons. "You continue to impress my maidens, Captain Park," she said, offering him a seat on a cushioned platform. "Particularly Ji Woo, who rarely admires anyone." "She's a skilled warrior," Taeho replied diplomatically. "I simply contributed what I could." "Your modesty is noted," the Queen said with a small smile. "But there are matters we must discuss before we reach Cerathy Prime." She touched a panel, and a 3-dimensional star map appeared between them, showing hundreds of systems glowing with different colors. "The blue systems belong to the Cerathy Dominion," she explained. "The red are controlled by the Vorn. The yellow are contested or neutral." Taeho studied the map. The red areas were spreading like a stain across the galaxy. "The Vorn consume rather than colonize," Nari continued. "They absorb all technology, knowledge, and biological distinctiveness into their collective. Entire species have disappeared, their achievements becoming merely new facets of Vorn capability." "How do they assimilate other species?" Taeho asked. "To defeat the Vorn completely. The text says the new allies must be willing to give up what they value most." Her expression was troubled. "Some on the Council interpret this to mean human volunteers must be connected to our defense network, a process that would destroy their individual consciousness." Taeho stared at her in shock. "That's what the study faction wants. To wire humans into your weapons." "Not the Queen," Su assured him, "but others in power. Be careful when we reach Cerathy Prime. Not all who smile at you wish you well." As she hurried away, Taeho leaned against the wall, processing this revelation. The situation was more complicated and dangerous than he had imagined. Somehow, he needed to protect his crew while still finding a way home, and perhaps save an entire civilization in the process. The Cerathy royal vessel limped into orbit around Cerathy Prime 3 days later. The planet below was beautiful. Vast oceans of deep purple surrounded continents with gleaming cities that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. As they prepared to descend to the surface, alarms suddenly blared across the ship. Taeho rushed to the bridge to find Queen Nari and her maidens gathered around tactical displays. "What's happening?" he asked. Ji Woo's face was grim. "Vorn attack fleet detected. Largest concentration we've ever encountered. Over 200 vessels approaching from multiple vectors. They followed us," Maiden Su said quietly. The human transmission acted as a beacon. Queen Nari remained calm. "Alert planetary defenses. Begin civilian evacuation protocols." On the displays, Tai-Ho watched as massive defense platforms orbiting Serathi Prime activated, their weapons charging. Serathi warships moved into defensive formations. "The Vorn will adapt to your standard tactics," Tai-Ho warned. "You need to change your approach." Ji-Woo nodded. "The captain is right. Our traditional defense grid patterns are too predictable." "What do you suggest?" the Queen asked. "Randomized response patterns," Tai-Ho said. "Assign each defense unit its own independent decision-making protocol, rather than coordinating from central command. The Vorn won't be able to predict which units will respond to which threats." As the Serathi implemented his suggestions, an officer reported, "Unknown vessels approaching from Sector 8. "More Vorn?" Ji-Woo asked, tensing. "No," the officer replied, sounding confused. "The configuration is human." The view screen shifted to show a fleet of Earth vessels emerging from what appeared to be a controlled wormhole. At their head was the Horizon, its hull gleaming with new modifications. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Horizon," said a communications officer. Engineer Soo-Jin's face appeared on screen. "Captain Park, we brought help." Tai-Ho stared in amazement at the Earth fleet behind her. "How did you?" "After we contacted Earth, they assembled every available ship," Soo-Jin explained. "We shared what we learned about Serathi technology to create a stable passage. We told them about the Vorn threat." A new face appeared. Admiral Kang of Earth Fleet Command, a stern man with gray hair. "Captain Park, your crew has briefed us on the situation. Earth stands ready to assist our new allies." Queen Neri stepped forward. "Admiral, I am Queen Neri of the Serathi. Your assistance is most welcome, but the Vorn are unlike any enemy you have faced." "We understand the risk," Admiral Kang replied. "But we also understand opportunity. Your technology coupled with our tactical approaches could turn the tide." The Vorn attack began minutes later. Their black ships swarmed toward the planet, firing weapons that seemed to distort space itself. The Serathi defenses responded, but as Tai-Ho had predicted, the Vorn quickly adapted to their patterns. Then the human fleet engaged. Their tactics appeared chaotic to the Serathi observers, ships breaking formation, attacking from unexpected angles, some even appearing to retreat only to circle back with devastating surprise attacks. "The humans fight without logic," Ji-Woo observed with growing respect. "No," Queen Nari corrected. "They fight with a different logic, one the Vorn cannot process." As the battle intensified, Tai-Ho coordinated between the human and Serathi forces. The Serathi provided their advanced weapons technology, while the humans contributed their unpredictable battle strategies. "Their collective consciousness is their weakness," Tai-Ho explained during a tactical meeting. "They think as one mind, efficient against predictable opponents, but vulnerable to chaos." The tide began to turn. For the first time in generations, the Vorn were forced to retreat from multiple engagement zones, but the victory came at a cost. Several human and Serathi ships were lost. Then a massive Vorn command ship emerged from hyperspace directly above the planet. It dwarfed all other vessels in the battle. "The collective nexus," Queen Neri said gravely. "Their central consciousness hub. If we could destroy it, the rest would be disoriented," Tai-Ho finished. "But it's too heavily shielded for a direct assault." Soo-Jin's voice came through the comm. "Captain, the Horizon's modifications might give us an opportunity. We've adapted the Serathi quantum disruption technology. If we could get close enough." "It's a suicide mission," Ji-Woo said bluntly. "Not necessarily," Tai-Ho replied, an idea forming. "We need a distraction, something so illogical that the Vorn would never predict it." Hours later, as the battle raged across the Serathi system, a small Serathi scout ship carrying Tai-Ho, Ji-Woo, and a combined human Serathi crew approached the massive Vorn command vessel. Behind them, the main fleets engaged in what appeared to be random, disorganized combat. "The Vorn are focusing on the fleet actions," Ji-Woo reported. "Our approach vector remains undetected." They can't believe anyone would directly approach their command ship with such a small vessel, Taiho said. It defies their logical analysis. They reached the underside of the massive ship. Su Jin, coordinating from the horizon, guided them to a vulnerable point in the Vorn defenses. Quantum disruptor charge, reported a human technician, ready to deploy. Now, Taiho ordered. The disruptor activated, sending waves of energy into the Vorn ship. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, sections of the black crystalline hull began to fracture. "It's working," Jiwoo exclaimed. "Their unified field is collapsing." Throughout the battle, Vorn ships suddenly became erratic. Some stopped moving entirely. Others began firing on their own kind. "The connection to the collective is breaking down," Queen Nari observed from the royal vessel. "Without central coordination, they cannot function." The victory was not immediate, but it was decisive. As the Nexus ship crumbled, the Vorn fleet fell into disarray. The combined human and Serethi forces methodically eliminated the remaining threats. 2 days later, Taiho stood with Queen Nari and Admiral Kang in the Grand Council chamber on Serethi Prime. The 12 maidens formed a circle around them, and representatives from both species filled the hall. "Today marks the beginning of a new alliance," Queen Nari announced. "The Serethi and humans, different in mind but united in purpose." Admiral Kang nodded. "Earth extends its hand in friendship. Together, we can stand against any threat." Taiho looked at Jiwoo, who now wore a small pin with Earth's symbol alongside her Serethi markings. "Perhaps," she said quietly to him, "differences in thinking are not weaknesses to overcome, but strengths to be shared." As the formal alliance was signed, Taiho thought about the long journey home that awaited him. But he knew he would return to this distant part of space. Humanity had found not just allies among the stars, but a new understanding of their unique place in the galaxy. Sometimes being different, being unpredictable, being human, was exactly what the universe needed.